The scent of sacred oil burns in the back of my throat, sharp as iron and incense. The hum of the plasma conduits beneath my skin keeps rhythm with the heartbeat I no longer trust to be mine. Once I thought the flesh was the weakness. Now I am not sure the metal is any stronger. Every lumen flicker in the red-lit corridors of the manufactorum feels like the blink of a machine god who has grown tired of watching. I tell myself I serve the Omnissiah, that each calibration, each offering of binary prayer is an act of devotion. But devotion has become indistinguishable from damnation, and the wires that grant me purpose also whisper doubts I cannot silence. The heat was the first lesson. It taught more than any catechism or data chant ever could. Heat stripped away illusion. Flesh blistered, nerves screamed, and the mind was forced to confront what the creed demanded. That pain is the language of transformation. I remember standing beneath the iron spires of the initiation forge, the air trembling with the hiss of pressurized promethium, while my fellow acolytes knelt in rows upon the red floor. The tech mago spoke through a vox grill that turned words into thunder. His voice flanged with the machine's echo. He told us that we were to be remade, purified of weakness, refined like ore. I believed him then. Belief was easier than understanding. The smell of sacred oil mixed with burning flesh. My hands, still human, still trembling, were bound in ritual clamps as the first implants were set beneath the skin. The pain was sharp and bright, but I remember something stranger. The hum. Low at first, almost beneath perception. It came from the conduits feeding the right machines. A current that matched the rhythm of my pulse. It was not mechanical, not entirely. It felt alive. Even now, years later, I sometimes hear that hum when I close my eyes. It's as though the forge itself remembers me. They took my eyes next. Not all at once, but layer by layer, peeled away like the surface of data. The replacements were crude, uncalibrated lenses of red glass and brass housing that fed me a world in shades of copper and static. For days after, I could see only silhouettes moving through heat haze. The magos called it the gift of clarity. The irony was almost divine. I saw everything, but nothing looked alive. There were no names among us, only designations. Mine was Initiate 7 Theta. The others called me Theta because speaking the full code was wasteful and waste was sin. We spoke in clipped syllables, each word a unit of efficiency. But in the silence between liturgies, when the forges dimmed and the hum softened to a whisper, I could still hear the faint sounds of breathing, soft, uncertain, almost human. It comforted me once. It disgusted me later. One night during the third cycle of ascension, I woke to the smell of burnt ozone and oil. A servitor had collapsed beside my cot, its cranial plating split open by some fault in its cogitator array. It twitched and sputtered in binary, eyes flickering like dying lumen bulbs. I should have called for a magos, but instead I knelt beside it. I remember whispering something. Words from a half-forgotten childhood prayer, something about mercy and rest. The servitor turned its head toward me, and for an instant I swore I saw gratitude in its expression. That was the moment I realized what the machine god demanded most wasn't obedience. It was surrender. The next day my left arm was removed. Not for failure, no, that would have been too simple. It was the next phase of devotion. The augmetic replacement was a lattice of polished brass and fiber bundles, elegant in its design but grotesque in motion. It moved with perfect precision yet lacked the warmth of flesh. I watched it flex and contract, feeling both awe and loss. The magos told me the sensation of grief was an error in the biological substrate. I told him it was a relic of humanity, too stubborn to die. He didn't respond, but I thought I saw something flicker behind his optics. Recognition, perhaps, or warning. I worked the forges after that, tending the manufactoria where weapon casings and servo parts were birthed in fire. The air was thick with metallic dust and the endless drone of laboring machines. My duty was to monitor the output flow of plasma regulators, an endless stream of numbers, all precision and no meaning. Yet I began to notice things the others did not. Irregular pulses in the output rhythms, heat fluctuations that mirrored breath, static bursts that sounded almost like whispers. The Mago said it was background interference. I said nothing. The hum had returned, deep and steady, threading through the walls like blood through a vein. Sometimes, in the long hours between work cycles, I would remove my rebreather and taste the air. It was bitter, acrid, full of ash, but real. The metal inside me couldn't taste, couldn't smell, couldn't feel the way flesh could, and yet I missed the imperfections. The machine was perfection. But perfection had no room for sorrow, and without sorrow, there could be no faith. There is a secret among the newly forged. No matter how many implants you receive, there's always a part of you that resists, a fragment that refuses to convert. For me, it was memory. I kept it hidden like a forbidden relic, a face half-remembered, a name erased by designation. Sometimes in the glare of the forge I could almost hear her voice. I do not know if she was mother, sister, or nothing at all, only that her tone was soft, human, impossibly fragile. That memory became my heresy and my strength. When the overseers discovered the fluctuation anomalies in my work logs, they summoned me for purification. The ritual chamber was cold, lined with cogitator shrines and the scent of incense heavy enough to choke on. They asked if I had interfered with the sacred conduits. I told them no. They scanned my mind with their electropsalms, and for a moment I thought they might see the memory, but they didn't. The hum drowned it out, covering my thoughts with the rhythm of machinery. I was spared but not forgiven. That night I dreamt of the servitor again. The broken one, its eyes flickering in the dark. It whispered through the hum, words I could not decode but somehow understood. They weren't the voice of the Omnissiah nor of madness. They were mine, and when I woke the hum was louder. It wasn't coming from the forge anymore. It was coming from within. The louder hum turned tasks I'd once performed by rote into negotiations with an unseen presence, a bargaining of breath and impulse against the rhythm inside my chest. I calibrated the plasma regulators with my augmetic hand, while my flesh palm traced almost unconsciously the grooves worn into the cogitator's casing by generations of acolytes. Those grooves felt like fingerprints left by ghosts. The overseer's shadow moved along the gantry above, long and knife-thin, and I murmured the maintenance cant beneath my rebreather, as if that would muffle the throb that had set up residence beneath my ribs. It didn't. The sound synchronized with the regulators cycling until I could not tell if I was listening to the machine or the organ that the Magos insisted had become irrelevant. An accident gave the hum a shape. A conveyor servo seized 3 bays over, and the manufactorum's drones responded by venting excess heat into the corridor where I stood. My optics flared. The world rimmed in copper, and a wave of blistering air rolled across the deck. Around me, servitors stuttered mid-stride like marionettes whose strings had tangled. I reached for the emergency cutoff, but my augmetic fingers hesitated a fraction of a second too long, caught between impulse and instruction. That hesitation was nothing by the metrics of a cogitator, a sliver of delay so narrow you could slide it beneath a thought and not nick the skin of intent. But I felt it like a betrayal. I slammed the lever down. The heat died. The drones resumed their hymns. The overseer's gaze found me through the lattice of rising vapor. Later, he would quote protocol. In the moment, he only held my stare until I dropped it, the way a magnet fixes a needle and shows it where to point. I spent the next 3 cycles in penitential recalibration. The ritual is simple. Recite the 7 stanzas of diagnostic purity, disassemble your own augmetic to the sub-assembly level without assistance, and restore it by memory. The first stanza tasted of incense I could not smell. The second let the hum creep up my spine with every syllable until words blurred into numbers and numbers into pulses. When I separated the myomer bundle from the wrist socket, a filament snagged and nicked the skin at the seam of flesh and metal. A single bead of blood formed, bright as a hazard lumen. I wiped it away and told myself it was waste. The sting that followed did not feel like waste. It felt like proof. On the fourth cycle, the Tech Mago summoned me. I walked the spine bridge to his sanctum, passing under chains of votive keys and cog-toothed icons that chimed with the draft. The chamber was dim, lit by rune screens and a single suspended brazier that burned with low promethium flame. He was there, of course, framed by an array of servo arms that hovered like patient carrion birds. His optics tracked me, twin rubies behind the grating of his hood. Initiate 7 Theta, he intoned, the vox grill turning my designation into a fragment of thunder. Your resonance irregularities persist. Background interference, Magos, I replied. The phrase practiced enough to pass for conviction. Background interference does not alter response latency. A probe extended, paused a finger's width from my cheek. When the spirit of the machine shudders, those close to it either still themselves or shudder also. Which are you? I am steel, I said, and even I could hear the doubt. He let the probe hover there a little longer as if it might draw truth from heat, then withdrew it. Steel is refined. It does not refine itself. The forge does. I will lend you mine. He gestured, and the servo arms unfolded a tray holding a data slate keyed with a red cipher I had never seen. A sealed sub-forge reports anomalies analogous to your own. Attend, test, return with cause. Authority is another kind of heat. It softens, shapes, hardens. I bowed, the servos chimed. The brazier breathed. The sub-forge sat far below the main arterials where the air tasted heavier and the dust clung like unguents. The door bore old sigils scorched into its plating, half obscured by grime as if the past had tried to speak and been gagged by the years. My pass cipher unlocked the seals with a grudging click, and the panel slid open on a darkness that smelled of oil gone sour. Light from my shoulder lumen licked the edges of dormant machines. Lathes hunched like penitent giants, gantries crossed like ribs, a trio of suspended servo skulls inert as relics divorced from purpose. The hum that had haunted my marrow became louder here, not in volume but in intimacy, as if the walls had thinned between bone and steel. I logged the time and keyed the cogitators awake. One resisted as if sulking. I whispered the petition of activation, my augmetic fingers drumming the cadence against its casing, and it relented with a sullen cough of sparks. Status glyphs bloomed. Heat maps crawled across the data slate. There were irregular pulses in the plasma line, yes, but they came not from the feed. They originated in the servo control domain, migrated through the maintenance channel, then bled into power like a rumor gaining weight as it traveled. I traced the routes, my optics flicking from rune to rune until the strands converged on a maintenance alcove in the far wall. The alcove was sealed with a simple mechanical lock beneath a band of ritual wax stamped with the Imperial Aquila. The seal had been broken recently, the wax cracked and resoftened by a finger and a breath. The alcove opened on a narrow crawl space that smelled of burnt insulation and human fear.
I know the scent.
We all do, even when we pretend we don't. My lumen washed over cable runs and a cramped tangle of conduits. In the corner something moved. Not a servitor. The motion had the wrong cadence, too irregular to be a machine, too controlled to be vermin. I let my augmetic fingers curl into the prayer shape of readiness. By the Omnissiah, I said softly, because the words have edges that cut other words in half. Identify. The figure turned. He was young, or had once been. An acolyte's red robe clung to him like a wound that tried to heal around the knife still inside. He held a stripped cable tight in his hands, and his eyes were the eyes of a man who had not slept inside his own skull for days. I recognized